Mia thermi ipodoki, which in ancient Greece means a very warm welcome to you, which is what I offer you as we begin the screencast for our last section on classical ancient Greece. And what better way to wrap it up than discussing one of my personal favorite characters from this time period, the great famous conqueror Alexander the Great. We'll take a look at Alexander and his empire in today's screencast. So to the essential questions. Who is Alexander anyway? We better find out who that is first. We'll meet the guy, figure out who he is, and why does history give him the name Great? And for that matter, what does it really even mean to be great? That'll form the basis of a good class discussion that we'll have later on. As we begin his story, we'll look at the conquest of Greece by his father, King Philip of Macedonia. We'll see how Alexander himself rises to power and ascends to the throne of Macedonia. And then we'll see what Alexander is really famous for, the conquest of the mighty Persian Empire. What battles did he fight against the Persians, and what goal did he have for this new empire once he did conquer Persia, and how did he go about achieving that goal? And finally, what became of Alexander's empire after his death? Those are all the things we're going to look at here in our last screencast on ancient Greece. So without further ado, let us begin. All right, so who is Alexander? Why do they call him Alexander the Great? Well, King Alexander of Macedonia, better known to history as Alexander the Great, was a Macedonian king and an incredibly successful military conqueror. During his lifetime, which was rather short, I might add, we'll find out more about that later, but during his lifetime, he conquered much of what was, to the Greeks, the known world. By the time of his death, his empire stretched from the Black Sea in the north, covered all of Greece down to Egypt in the south, and as far east as India. This was a large part of what was the known world to the Greeks. To the Greeks, the world was the Mediterranean Sea region, Greece, and Persia, and Alexander ruled most of it by the time of his death. But is this really what makes him or anyone great? Conquest? Land? That'll be a good discussion for later. Now, to understand Alexander's story, we kind of have to go backwards a little bit. To really understand how Alexander comes to power, we first have to meet Alexander's daddy, a king of Macedonia called Philip, King Philip II. Now, if we remember, the last time that we left the Greeks, the Peloponnesian War had just ended. And this was followed by other civil wars, and the Greek mainland, the Greek city-states were weak, they were divided, they were constantly infighting. Well, while Greece is busy fighting itself, to the north, a new power is rising, and that's the Kingdom of Macedonia under its king, Philip II. This is Alexander's dad. And while the Greeks are busy fighting each other, Macedonia has grown powerful. Philip has trained and disciplined the Macedonian army to make it the most powerful military force in the Greek world. And Philip, who is a great lover of Greek culture, sees the disjointed, infighting Greek city-states, and his goal is to conquer and unify them, bring a unified Greece together under his control. And so he sets out to accomplish this goal, and through a series of military campaigns, creation of political alliances, heck, even marriages, Philip manages to take control over almost all of Greece by 338 BC. I say almost because the one little part of Greece he didn't take was Sparta. No big surprise there. Well, now that he has finally united the squabbling Greeks, he plans an even more audacious goal, and that is to take this combined Greek and Macedonian kingdom and use it to invade the mighty Persian Empire. That's some big boots to fill, ladies and gentlemen. But unfortunately, before Philip can carry out his very audacious plan, he's murdered by an assassin. He was having a big celebration to signify the marriage to his most recent wife. I think she was wife number 6. How many wives a man can have? Well, he had 6, and then he died, celebrating this marriage. And upon his death, his young 20-year-old son, Alexander, becomes the new king of Macedonia. And the young 20-year-old Alexander, well, eventually his military exploits would earn him the aforementioned title of Alexander the Great. Now, he's young, okay? Let's make no mistake. 20 is very, very young, especially to be trusted with such great political and military authority. But despite Alexander's youth, he's already a very accomplished individual. See, even though he's 20, Alexander has actually been a general in the Macedonian army since he was 16. Imagine that. For you guys, it's really exciting to get your driver's license when you're 16. Well, when he was 16, Alexander was a general, commanding soldiers, leading men in the field in battle. By 20, he's already a great soldier and a great leader, very highly respected by the army, by the soldiers, by Philip's officers. On top of that, Alexander was personally tutored by none other than the great philosopher Aristotle. And so as a result, Alexander is a very highly educated individual. He's very intelligent. He's very curious about the world around him. Now, unfortunately for the Greeks, they don't recognize exactly who they're dealing with in Alexander, because in the confusion following Philip's death, some of the Greek city-states make the mistake of trying to rebel against Macedonian rule, among them being the city-state of Thebes. Thebes sort of led this rebellion. They didn't think that young Alexander would be able to hold the kingdom together, so they rebelled. Well, Alexander, to his credit, marches the army south and issues an ultimatum to Thebes, tells them that they needed to cease and desist their rebellion immediately or there would be consequences. Well, again, underestimating Alexander, they refused. So, in response, Alexander's armies tore down the walls of Thebes, razed the city, burned it to the ground as punishment. As you can imagine, the Greeks never messed with Alexander ever again. Well, with Alexander now firmly in control of Greece and the kingdom, he sets forward to carry out his father's original plan for the invasion of Persia. He brings a combined army of Greeks and Macedonians, 35,000 in total, about 30,000 infantry, 5,000 cavalry. And with this 35,000 man army, he crosses over into Asia Minor to begin his invasion of Persia. Now think about how audacious that really is. He's got 35,000 guys, right? Remember the last time Persia invaded Greece? You remember how many they brought with them? Try 200,000. So he thinks he's going to walk in the door to the mighty Persian Empire with 35,000 guys and conquer it? Why, yes. Yes, he does. And Alexander's armies will face the mighty Persian armies time and time again in a campaign that will last several years. And not only does he face them, he defeats them. And he doesn't barely beat them, he wipes the floor with them. Specifically in three major battles, Alexander's armies fight against the Persians and defeat them under their emperor Darius III. The first of these major battles took place near the Granicus River, located in Asia Minor, shortly after his army had landed. We'll go into more details on each of these battles in class. This isn't the place for it, but just know Alexander's army wins that first battle at the Granicus River. A year later, Alexander's armies meet with the Persians again. This time the Persian army is personally being led by Emperor Darius at Issus in the southeastern corner of Asia Minor. Once again, Alexander is victorious, and the rout in this battle is so complete that as Darius flees the battlefield for his own safety, he never even goes back to his own camp. And as Alexander and his army move into the Persian camp, they find that Darius left behind his entire family, his wife, his daughters, and his mother, all there for the taking, as it turned out. Well done on that one, Darius. A couple of years later, Alexander and Darius meet one last time in the final decisive battle of the Persian campaign near the Tigris River in what is present-day Iraq at a place called Gaugamela. At Gaugamela, Darius's main army, although hugely outnumbering Alexander, is absolutely crushed. The Persian army is just crushed by Alexander, who used superior military tactics. And with the defeat of Darius's army, Darius flees the battlefield, but is later murdered by his own generals. The battle, the victory at Gaugamela, seals Alexander's victory in the Persian campaign. So by the age of 25, Alexander now rules nearly all of the known world to the Greeks. Not too bad by the time you're 25 years old. Now, originally, when Alexander set forth with this campaign against Persia, his stated goal for the campaign, which he called West against East, the stated goal was to punish Persia for their past attacks against Greece. Now, realize here that it's been over 150 years since the Persians last attacked Greece. That's a pretty lame reason. Honestly, it's just to get the Greeks on board. But either way, that's ostensibly the goal. But as he conquered more and more land, and met more and more Persian people, we see that Alexander's views about the Persians begin to change. Originally, he came in under the belief that they were these barbaric, subhuman individuals, but as he meets more people and learns more about the Persian culture, his views change, and with a new respect for Persian culture, his campaign changes from being west against east to now west and east. Alexander comes to the conclusion that Persian culture is very deep and rich and has great value, and that the Greeks can learn a lot from their connection to the Persians. And so what he wants to do, instead of conquering and subjugating and annihilating Persian culture, he wants to unite it with Greek culture. He wants to take the best of Greek and Persian culture and bring them together in his empire into something that modern historians have called one world. Rather than the world of the Greeks and the world of the Persians, it should be one united world of Alexander's empire. And Alexander's a man of action. He's not just talk, he's action. And so he promotes this goal of unity through his own actions. For example, Alexander, whenever he is in Persian lands around Persian people, he dresses like a Persian, and he imitates Persian culture and Persian royal court life. Alexander even married a Persian wife. Three of them, actually. Two of them were relatives of the now dead Emperor Darius, and one of them was an exotic dancer. But, you can do that when you're like king of the world. He even encouraged his troops to marry Persian women to further unite the culture. And if you're going to have this united Greek-Persian empire, you need to come together with them. So he enlisted 30,000 Persian soldiers into his own army. And to try to spread Greek culture, Alexander founded Greek colonies and Greek-style cities all over his empire, 70 of them to be exact. All of them called Alexandria, by the way. But again, I guess when you're king of almost the whole known Greek world, you can name cities after yourself. And to this very day, cities called Alexandria dot the landscape in what used to be Alexander's empire. Many of them are today still major population centers in those parts of the world. Well, one city he didn't call Alexandria. He called it Bucephala. He named it after his horse. There's a story behind that. I'll tell you later. So what we see happening is that Alexander's achieving his goal of bringing the two cultures together. The Hellenistic, that's Greek culture, is mixing with the elements of Persian culture, and they're forming a new sort of hybrid culture that historians call the Hellenistic culture. Now, Alexander would eventually stretch his empire all the way to India. He would defeat armies, win battles, but the only thing that would eventually stop him was his own soldiers. At the point where they reached India, his soldiers said, "Enough is enough. We're tired of fighting. We're tired of traveling. We want to go home." And so they convinced him to turn around and go home. But this doesn't mean Alexander was done fighting. As they made their trek back to Persepolis and Susa and finally to Babylon, which would be the capital of his empire, Alexander continued to plan for new military campaigns to Saudi Arabia, into North Africa, into the Italian peninsula. So he continued to make plans for new campaigns. Unfortunately, he never carried through with those plans. That's because he died in the city of Babylon in 323 BC. Alexander lived hard and he died fast, and after a night of hard partying and drinking, he suddenly took ill. Officially, the record says that he died of a fever, malaria, but there are questions among historians whether he died of excessive drinking or even if he was assassinated by poison. Either way, the man who controlled almost all the Greek world died at the young age of 33 in 323 BC. Now, when Alexander died, he had 3 wives but no children. Now, one of his wives was pregnant, but he had no children, and thus he didn't have a direct heir, and he never named an heir to take over after his death. So what happened was his generals disputed who should rule after Alexander, and this led to a civil war between them that lasted nearly 20 years. Now, when the civil war was finally over, 3 of the top generals divided the empire among themselves: Antigonus, Seleucus, and Ptolemy. Antigonus took Asia Minor, Seleucus took the east, and Ptolemy took what is today Egypt. Now, even though Alexander's empire fell apart after his death, the Hellenistic combined Eastern and Western world that he created, along with its cultural and its economic connections, would continue to exist and influence the rest of the ancient world for centuries. So we looked at Alexander the Great today, guys, and we met him and tried to figure out what great really means. We saw the Macedonians take over all of Greece, and we also saw Alexander rise to power. We had the opportunity to see what made Alexander sort of great in his conquest of Persia, and we discussed what happened to his empire after his death. So you guys be ready to talk about each of these topics the next time that we meet. And as always, until that time, I bid you farewell.